Chapter 38. Prosperity is the best protector of principle. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. Evening, 14th. Sailed in the Rosetta. This is a poor old ship, and ought to be insured and sunk. As in the Oceana, just so here. Everybody dresses for dinner, and they make it a sort of pious duty. These fine and formal costumes are a rather conspicuous contrast to the poverty and shabbiness of the surroundings. If you want a slice of lime at 4 o'clock tea, you must sign an order on the bar. Limes cost 14 cents a barrel. January 18th. We've been running up the Arabian Sea latterly, closing up on Bombay now, and due to arrive this evening. January 20th, Bombay. A bewitching place, a bewildering place, an enchanting place. The Arabian Nights come again. It is a vast city, contains about 1 million inhabitants. Natives they are, with a slight sprinkling of white people, not enough to have the slightest modifying effect upon the massed dark complexion of the public. It is winter here, yet the weather is the divine weather of June, and the foliage is the fresh and heavenly foliage of June. There is a rank of noble great shade trees across the way from the hotel, and under them sit groups of picturesque natives of both sexes, and the juggler in his turban is there, with his snakes and his magic, and all day long the cabs and multitudinous varieties of costumes flock by. It does not seem as if one could ever get tired of watching this moving show, this shining and shifting spectacle. In the great bazaar the pack and jam of natives was marvelous. The sea of rich-colored turbans and draperies an inspiring sight, and the quaint and showy Indian architecture was just the right setting for it. Toward sunset another show. This is the drive around the seashore to Malabar Point, where Lord Sandhurst, the governor of the Bombay presidency, lives. Parsee palaces all along the first part of the drive, and past them all the world is driving. The private carriages of wealthy Englishmen and natives of rank are manned by a driver and 3 footmen in stunning oriental liveries. 2 of these turbaned statues standing up behind, as fine as monuments. Sometimes even the public carriages have this superabundant crew, slightly modified, one to drive, one to sit by and see it done, and one to stand up behind and yell when there is anybody in the way, and for practice when there isn't. It all helps to keep up the liveliness and augment the general sense of swiftness and energy and confusion and powwow. In the region of Scandal Point, felicitous name, where there are handy rocks to sit on and a noble view of the sea on the one hand, and on the other the passing and repassing whirl and tumult of gay carriages, and great groups of comfortably off Parsee women, perfect flower beds of brilliant color, a fascinating spectacle. Tramp, tramp, tramping along the road in singles, couples, groups, and gangs. You have the working man and the working woman, but not clothed like ours. Usually the man is a nobly built great athlete, with not a rag on but his loin handkerchief, his color a deep dark brown, his skin satin, his rounded muscles knobbing it as if it had eggs under it. Usually the woman is a slender and shapely creature, as erect as a lightning rod. and she has but one thing on, a bright-colored piece of stuff which is wound around her head and her body, down nearly halfway to her knees, and which clings like her own skin. Her legs and feet are bare, and so are her arms, except for her fanciful bunches of loose silver rings on her ankles and on her arms. She has jewelry bunched on the side of her nose also, and showy clusterings on her toes. When she undresses for bed, she takes off her jewelry, I suppose. If she took off anything more, she would catch cold. As a rule, she has a large, shiny brass water jar of graceful shape on her head, and one of her naked arms curves up and the hands hold it there. She is so straight, so erect, and she steps with such style and such easy grace and dignity, and her curved arm and her brazen jar are such a help to the picture. Indeed, our working women cannot begin with her as a road decoration. It is all color, bewitching color, enchanting color, everywhere all around, all the way around the curving great opaline bay clear to Government House, where the turbaned big native Chubrasis stand grouped in state at the door, in their robes of fiery red, and do most properly and stunningly finish up the splendid show and make it theatrically complete. I wish I were a Chubrasi. This is indeed India, the land of dreams and romance, of fabulous wealth and fabulous poverty, of splendor and rags, of palaces and hovels, of famine and pestilence, of genii and giants and Aladdin lamps, of tigers and elephants, the cobra and the jungle, the country of 100 nations and 100 tongues, of 1,000 religions and 2,000,000 gods, cradle of the human race, birthplace of human speech, mother of history, grandmother of legend, great-grandmother of tradition, whose yesterdays bear date with the moldering antiquities of the rest of the nations, one sole country under the sun that is endowed with an imperishable interest for alien prince and alien peasant, for lettered and ignorant, wise and fool, rich and poor, bond and free, the one land that all men desire to see, and having seen once by even a glimpse, would not give that glimpse for the shows of all the rest of the globe combined. Even now, after the lapse of a year, the delirium of those days in Bombay has not left me, and I hope it never will. It was all new, no detail of it hackneyed, and India did not wait for morning. It began at the hotel straight away. The lobbies and halls were full of turbaned and fezzed and embroidered, capped and barefooted, and cotton-clad natives, some of them rushing about, others at rest squatting or sitting on the ground, some of them chattering with energy, others still and dreamy. In the dining-room, every man's own private native servant standing behind his chair, and dressed for a part in the Arabian Nights. Our rooms were high up on the front. A white man, he was a burly German, went up with us, and brought 3 natives along to see to arranging things. About 14 others followed in procession, with a hand baggage. Each carried an article, and only one, a bag, in some cases, and in other cases less. One strong native carried my overcoat, another a parasol, another a box of cigars, another a novel, and the last man in the procession had no load but a fan. It was all done with earnestness and sincerity. There was not a smile in the procession, from the head of it to the tail of it. Each man waited patiently and tranquilly, in no sort of hurry, till one of us had found time to give him a copper. Then he bent his head reverently, touched his forehead with his fingers, and went away. They seemed a soft and gentle race, and there was something both winning and touching about their demeanor. There was a vast glazed door which opened upon the balcony. It needed closing or cleaning or something, and a native got down on his knees and went to work at it. He seemed to be doing it well enough, but perhaps he wasn't, for the burly German put on a look that betrayed dissatisfaction, and then, without explaining what was wrong, gave the native a brisk cuff on the jaw, and then told him where the defect was. It seemed such a shame to do that before us all. The native took it with meekness, saying nothing, and not showing in his face or manner any resentment. I had not seen the likes of this for 50 years. Carried me back to my boyhood, and flashed upon me the forgotten fact that this was the usual way of explaining one's desires to a slave. I was able to remember that the method seemed right and natural to me in those days, I being born to it, and unaware that elsewhere there were other methods. But I was also able to remember that those unresented cuffings made me sorry for the victim and ashamed for the punisher. My father was a refined and kindly gentleman, very grave, rather austere, of rigid probity, a sternly just and upright man, albeit he attended no church and never spoke of religious matters, and had no part nor lot in the pious joys of his Presbyterian family, nor ever seemed to suffer from this deprivation. He laid his hand upon me in punishment only twice in his life, and then not heavily, once for telling him a lie, which surprised me and showed me how unsuspicious he was, for that was not my maiden effort. He punished me those 2 times only, and never any other member of the family at all, yet every now and then he cuffed our harmless slave boy Louis, for trifling little blunders and awkwardnesses. My father had passed his life among the slaves from his cradle up, and his cuffings proceeded from the custom of the time, not from his nature. When I was 10 years old, I saw a man fling a lump of iron ore at a slave man in anger, for merely doing something awkwardly, as if that were a crime. It bounded from the man's skull, and the man fell and never spoke again. He was dead in an hour. I knew the man had a right to kill his slave if he wanted to, and yet it seemed a pitiful thing and somehow wrong. Though why wrong I was not deep enough to explain, for I had not been asked to do it. Nobody in the village approved of that murder, but of course no one said much about it. It is curious, the space-annihilating power of thought. For just 1 second all that goes to make the me in me was a Missourian village on the other side of the globe, vividly seeing again these forgotten pictures of 50 years ago, and wholly unconscious of all things but just those. And in the next second I was back in Bombay, and that kneeling native's smitten cheek was not done tingling yet. Back to boyhood 50 years, back to age again another 50, and a flight equal to the circumference of the globe, all in 2 seconds by the watch. Some natives, I don't remember how many, went into my bedroom now and put things to right, and arranged the mosquito bar, and I went to bed to nurse my cough. It was about 9 in the evening. What a state of things! For 3 hours the yelling and shouting of natives in the hall continued, along with the velvety patter of their swift bare feet. What a racket it was! They were yelling orders and messages down 3 flights. Why, in the matter of noise, it amounted to a riot, an insurrection, a revolution. And then there were other noises mixed up with these, and at intervals tremendously accented them. Roofs falling in, I judged, windows smashing, persons being murdered, crows squawking and deriding and cursing, canaries screeching, monkeys jabbering, macaws blaspheming, and every now and then fiendish bursts of laughter and explosions of dynamite. By midnight I had suffered all the different kinds of shocks there are, and I knew that I could never more be disturbed by them, either isolated or in combination. Then came peace, stillness, deep and solemn, and lasted till 5. Then it all broke loose again, and who restarted it? The bird of birds, the Indian crow. I came to know him well by and by, and be infatuated with him. I suppose he is the hardest lot that wears feathers. Yes, and the cheerfulest and the most satisfied with himself. He never arrived at what he is by any careless process, or any sudden one. He is a work of art, and art is long. He is the product of immemorable ages and of deep calculation. One can't make a bird like that in a day. He has been reincarnated more times than Shiva, and he has kept a sample of each incarnation and fused it into his constitution. In the course of his evolutionary promotions, his sublime march towards ultimate perfection, he has been a gambler, a low comedian, a dissolute priest, a fussy woman, a blackguard, a scoffer, a liar, a thief, a spy, an informer, a trading politician, a swindler, a professional hypocrite, a patriot for cash, a reformer, a lecturer, a lawyer, a conspirator, a rebel, a royalist, a democrat, a practicer and propagator of irreverence, a meddler, an intruder, a busybody, an infidel, and a wallower in sin for the mere love of it. The strange result, the incredible result, of this patient accumulation of all damnable traits is that he does not know what care is. He does not know what sorrow is. He does not know what remorse is. His life is one long, thundering ecstasy of happiness, and he will go to his death untroubled, knowing that he will soon turn up again as an author or something, and be even more intolerably capable and comfortable than ever he was before, in his straddling wide forward step and his springy sidewise series of hops, and his impudent air and his cunning way of canting his head to one side upon occasion. He reminds one of the American blackbird. But the sharp resemblances stop there. He is much bigger than the blackbird, and he lacks the blackbird's trim and slender and beautiful build and shapely beak, and of course his sober garb of gray and rusty black is a poor and humble thing compared with the splendid luster of the blackbird's metallic sables and shifting and flashing bronze glories. The blackbird is a perfect gentleman in deportment and attire, and is not noisy, I believe, except when holding religious services and political conventions in a tree. But this Indian sham Quaker is just a rowdy, and is always noisy when awake. Always chaffing, scolding, scoffing, laughing, ripping, and cursing, and carrying on about something or other. I never saw such a bird for delivering opinions. Nothing escapes him. He notices everything that happens, and brings out his opinion about it, particularly if it is a matter that is none of his business, and it is never a mild opinion, but always violent, violent and profane. The presence of ladies does not affect him. His opinions are not the outcome of reflection, for he never thinks about anything, but heaves out the opinion that is on top in his mind, and which is often an opinion about some quite different thing and does not fit the case. But that is his way. His main idea is to get out an opinion, and if he stopped to think he would lose chances. I suppose he has no enemies among men. The whites and Mohammedans never seem to molest him, and the Hindus, because of their religion, never take the life of any creature, but spare even the snakes and tigers and fleas and rats. If I sat on one end of the balcony, the crows would gather on the railing at the other end, and talk about me, and edge closer little by little, till I could almost reach them, and they would sit there in the most unabashed way, talk about my clothes and my hair and my complexion, and probable character and vocation and politics, and how I came to be in India, and what I had been doing, and how many days I'd got for it, and how I had happened to go unhanged so long, and when would it probably come off, and might there be more of my sort where I came from, and when they would be hanged, and so on, until I could no longer endure the embarrassment of it. Then I would shoo them away, and they would circle around in the air a little while, laughing and deriding and mocking, and presently settle on the rail and do it all over again. They were very sociable when there was anything to eat, oppressively so. With a little encouragement they would come in and light on the table and help me eat my breakfast. And once, when I was in the other room and they found themselves alone, they carried off everything they could lift, and they were particular to choose things which they could make no use of after they got them. In India their number is beyond estimate, and their noise is in proportion. I suppose they cost the country more than the government does, yet that is not a light matter. Still, they pay. Their company pays. It would sadden the land to take their cheerful voice out of it.